政治の街。もともと栄えてたのは、ホーチミンで、みたいな。そういうのは、かなりもう、大昔の話で。
そうなの？
今はなんかハノイの人の方が羽振りが良いと。
そうなの？
うん、そうみたいです。で、なんか走ってる、もうむしろ、ある一部の人たちは日本の平均的な生活水準をもう超えてるかもしれないと。ものすごいいいマンションに住んで、高級車を乗り回して。
いやー、それは、高橋間違いだよ。ごくわずかの金持ちだ。それみんなね、日本人は間違えてんだよ。間違えた報道でね、間違えた報道でね。
でも、いわゆる、中間層みたいな人たちも、それなりにやっぱりお金を稼げるようになってきてるのも事実で、スポーツセンターが流行るっていうのも、そういう、
それは高橋ね、間違いです。ベトナムはね、高級車乗り回しての 0.01% です。で、それはね、日本の報道はね、知らないからそういう報道するけどし、北川さんもね、金持ちとしか会わないか分かんないだけです。30キロね、ハノイから中入ったらもうね、個人機みたいな人ばっかりです。それを知らないんです。だから1億人いるんですけど、彼知ってるのは10万人ぐらいです。で政府関係者は金持ちが多くて、賄賂で超えてるんですけど。
で、確かにですね、走ってる車は高くても個人所有とは。
Why not speak English? Because she today is just nobody coming here. So she never understands Japanese. You can speak English. Everybody understands.
Okay. Yeah, so I feel a little bit doubted on what Kitagawa-san explained on the current situation said by Kitagawa-san that the many people is driving the expensive car.
He's the head of JICA in Hanoi.
Ho Chi Minh.
ホーチミン？
うん。
北川。
北川さん、
ハノイ。
in Ho Chi Minh. Hanoi. Then, sometimes the expensive car is not personal. So they bought as the company expense. So it doesn't mean everyone is driving expensive as personal asset.
JICA is the middle of government and private sector, but they never touch in the popular ordinary people. They are just only meeting with large companies, executive and government officers and so forth. So they don't know the actual private life standard. So he doesn't know in detail about what is Vietnamese standard level of life. So this is a Japanese people problem. Japanese usually they got the only news on the high level people, like same in India, right? Many people misunderstand the level of Indian people life. It's majority people very poor. So this is a Japanese people misunderstand. Okay, let's going to start. Today is Sonoda will going to have a lecture today, and he's talking about what are you going to talk about today? Confucianism or
structure of the Japanized Confucianism.
Oh, Japanese Confucianism again. He's going to speak today. Okay, let me introduce. Okay, just introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yuko Matsuda. I work for an asset management firm as an ESG specialist, and this is my first time to join Mr. Unma-san's lecture, and I'm very much looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go and start.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
What is the reason why you are interested in Mojuku and you decided to join today?
Actually, I've known Unma-san is having lectures for more than 1 or 2 years, and I always wanted to participate, but Saturday afternoon is a little bit tricky time for me, and today I was able to make the trip.
So you knew the Uno-san through the books or website? Or?
Yes.
Fan, big fan.
Yeah, she just came first time. The first time meeting with you?
Second time.
Second time.
Oh, second time.
Last summer she was coming.
You already did your self-introduction.
And I watched few videos
Ah.
on YouTube.
Okay.
Oh, you watched my video?
Yes. In Malaysia, when I was in Malaysia.
Really? What's the video? How do you feel?
Really good lecture.
Okay. She's Kimoto. He's a IT consulting company executive.
It's really nice.
Nice miss.
Okay, so let's start.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Yoshiaki Sonoda, and today is once in a month I make the presentation about the spirits of Japan, and actually I lectured about these topics about 2 years in Japanese, and now I try to explain in English, but there are so many tough things. One of the most toughest thing is how to translate the many the very specific old word or the title of the books. But anyway, today's topics is today's lecture is a third chapters of Spirits of Japan, and today's topics is Japanese Confucianism. I think the Japanese Confucianism is somehow very new to all of you, I think. I think you may be able to understand later. And so today I have new 2 members. So let me say something about the brief introduction, and also summarization of the previous chapters, which I talked maybe for one year. And
すいません、もう一回繋いでもいいですか？
はい。
なんか、画面が出てこないので、
あら
ちょっと一回切って繋ぎます。
OK
すいません。あ、大丈夫です。すいません。大丈夫
ちょっ
で
と待って、
す。
画面共有するからちょっと待って。
はい。
共有。共有をこれね、一回抜かないとダメだ。OK。あれあったあった。OK。高橋見れるか？
はい、見ます。
OK。
解像度がね。
ありがとうございます。
OK, go ahead.
Okay. This is a page I always show you at the very beginning of the lecture, and the Spirits of Japan outline. The purpose of this lecture is to explain how and what the Japanese actually learned during the Edo era, and the reason why is we believe that that is also the fundamental root of our learnings, or root of our spirits. When most of the Japanese still right now have, like if you get on the train and if you see the elder people, maybe the young people will surrender the seats to the elder people. Or another example is we had a huge earthquake in 2011, maybe, yeah, in Tohoku, and there are many examples, but one of the typical example was there was the convenience stores. We say, Japanese say convenience stores, maybe Lawson or 7-Eleven or something. And but at that moment, the electricity was down and nobody's there. So it was possible to steal anything from a store. But nobody tried to do that. Instead, everybody made the lines and stood up the long line. And if somebody took the product from the shelf, then everybody put the money on the desk, and nobody steal the money itself also. That is also the amazing. It was amazing thing for the foreign press people. So that kind of news were broadcasted to the world, but it seems the Japanese is a kind of the very polite and very.
Do you know the story of the Australian submarine sunk in near Sydney?
During World War II?
Submarine, Japanese submarine.
Yes, Matsuoka, Takayoshi.
And then after that, after World War II, Australian government they just show up, and they try to open the inside. Do you know that?
Yes, I already introduced that story in a Japanese version.
Yeah, this is the same as last one, right?
Yeah. So, but unfortunately, somehow the situation in Japan is now the worse and worse. One of the big reasons is most of the Japanese forget about what we learned in past, especially before the World War II. There are two miles the turning point, but one turning point was the Meiji Restoration, and another turning point was the end of the World War II. So we faced the two big the turning point, and gradually now modern Japanese are now losing our identity, and because of the ignorance or what actually our ancestors learned. So the purpose of this lecture is to introduce what we learned during the before the Meiji Restoration. That was 1867, and also how we can recover or get back our root, and how can we construct our future for this country, for this nation. This is the purpose of this lecture. And the previous two lectures, I explained about a very brief introduction about this lecture. This is the chapter 1. And then in chapter 2, I also introduced about the 5 typical the Japanese which we should learn from their life. And those 5 peoples were introduced by the book, which name was The Representative Men of Japan, which was written by the Uchimura Kanzo in 19,000. And at the same moment, another famous Japanese wrote another famous book, Bushido, which was written by the Nitobe Inazo. And that's why now many foreign people knows about the name of the Bushido. But the Japanese ourselves didn't learn about that. So that was some kind of a mystery. So anyway, today the lectures is about the rough structure of the Japanese Confucianism. So the title of and the number of the lecture is somehow different, but we are now here, and also the before I start the explanation, I like to apologize about the not well prepared material. So still I'm working on, and if I cannot explain today, then I'd like to continue the next time. So I'd like to explain with best effort. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I have a question
Yes.
about Confucianism. around AD 500, Confucianism and Buddhists came to the Japan about the same occasion. But Japan has many great Buddhists, Nichiren, Kukai, before the Edo era. But Confucianism, Japanese Confucianism, after middle of the Edo era, for example, Tojo Nakae, he's a great Confucianist in Japan. It seems like for Japanese, it takes a long time to localize the Confucianism, isn't it? But Buddhism is very not necessary to localize. I don't understand why Buddhism is very popular in Japan very so early time. But Confucianism should be popular after the Edo era. Especially Ieyasu Tokugawa use a very important learning material for the Confucianism. But it's very strange for me. Same time Confucianism and Buddhists come to Japan. But Buddhists very early time spread in Japan. But Confucianism couldn't spread in Japan. It's very mystery for me.
Yeah, that is also the topics which I'm going to explain. So can I postpone to answer your question in a later explanation of today's lecture? Okay. So I always also show this chart, and this chart is also the original one of mine. And so the upper graph shows the very rough image of how the economics of Japan increases or decreases along as time goes. And looking at the bottom of the sheet, here is the name of the era, Edo era, and the Meiji era, Taisho era, and the Showa era, and now Heisei era here. So for the attendance of staff who doesn't know much about the history of Japan, I also would like to explain a little bit about the nature of each era. And so Edo era. Yes, Edo era started from 1603 or 4, but actually the actual start was maybe 1635 or 7 or so. And after the huge the battle, the war period, before that, we Japanese fought together in Japan, and many the soldiers fought together to get their territories in Japan. But most of them fought under the imperial court. So that situation is slightly different from a situation in China. So that's why we say in Japan the history of imperial court lasts more than 2,668 years. That is the longest the history in all over the world. Only the one imperial court continues to govern Japan, and the soldiers who fought together were all worked for the emperor. And also the reason why I studied the timeline from Edo was because the Edo era was the most significant the period for the learning and education in Japan. Because before the Edo era, talking about the situation of ordinary people, they were all suffered with such kind of a turmoil caused by the soldiers' war, so war period. So, but after the Tokugawa Ieyasu took won the war, he declared, we are going to change this nation, and we are going to abandon the sword Instead, we are going to govern this nation with the literature or educations. So after the declaration of such a declaration of Tokugawa Ieyasu, several tens years later, the turmoils settled, and we had a very peaceful moment. And the Edo era itself lasted about 250 years. It was quite a very peaceful era. But if I look into the situation in Edo era precisely, roughly we can split the Edo era into the three phases. At the very first phase, there are still the turmoil remained because that's just after the war period. And in the middle of the Edo era, that was exactly the very, very peaceful moment. And one of the example is the ukiyo-e. It is a Japanese-like very special sort of the drawings. Didn't you have never seen the pictures or?
Is it a kind of arts?
Yes, art. Like faces of the people, or one of the a famous one is here's big waves, and you can see the Mount Fuji under the waves. That kind of drawings were appeared at that moment, because the society of Japan was so peaceful. So that's why a lot of such kind of painters or writers or any kinds of art were developed during this period. And at the end of the most final phase of the Edo, that was the moment when the people were too much satisfied with their life. So soon the people's the moral deteriorated, and also at that moment also the period when Japan faced to the huge pressure from foreign countries, thinking about the history of India. That was also the moment when India was occupied by the UK, and they moved from India to the Asian countries, and after that they moved up to the north, from south to the north. And along side of their movement from south to the north, they tried to occupy every Asian country one by one, from Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Taiwan, and the next is the Japan, and also maybe the Korea and the China. So, so at the end of the Edo era, we had experience about such kind of pressure from foreign country, Western countries, and especially talking about what kind of pressure that is the threat to be occupied by. So that it was inevitable to think about what other the nation outside was doing. So at that moment was also the timing for the Japanese people to think about the situation outside of our nations. And at the end, so the Edo era was over in 1867, and this one is one of the big turning point. And in two reasons. One is we changed our like a lifestyle from like a special sort of hairstyle and the sword, samurai period, to the modern suits, and so that apparatus or our clothes, hairstyle, all changed, and also we also changed our the politics. We established the core, the cabinet as a modern the countries, And also, we created so huge number of the laws, including the educations or taxings or whatever. And that was the beginning of the history of modern Japan. That was what happened in the Meiji Restoration. We call it Meiji Restoration. And in Meiji and Taisho, this was the moment when we developed our industries, so that the economics drastically increased during the Meiji and the Taisho. And during these two eras, we experienced three big wars. First war was the Sino-Japan War. This was happened in 1894. And another big war was with the Russia. That was in 1904. And as I said, in the previous lecture, I introduced the 5 famous Japanese persons who lived before this era, and between the two these war, Uchimura Kanzo wrote that book to introduce what kind of a people Japanese is to the foreigners in English first. And the Bushido was also written in English, and the purpose of the Nitobe Inado was also same, because before this turning point, Meiji Restoration, nobody knows what kind of people Japanese was. And from the aspect of European countries, Japanese were almost the same with other the Asian people. There's no distinction from them. So one of the pressure for the Japanese people at this moment was how to show ourselves to the foreign countries. So that the two writers wrote the 2 books in English, and also another trial was we built the one dance hall in Tokyo, and we tried to have the huge Western style party there. The name of that the dance hall was Rokumeikan. That was one of the most first the buildings constructions. The design was totally same with the European style the house, while the most of the house in the Edo era was built by the wood and paper. So that was a huge difference. So anyway, that was also our trial to show our modernization in a rapid way. So, but anyway, so we experienced the 2 wars, and the result of that, we won the 2 wars, and the economics increased drastically to the year of the 1941. And the 3rd war was the World War II, or in our words, we call this war the Great East Asian War. Yeah, because everything have
you don't need to adjust for Yuba. Okay, you just speak for the common Japanese common.
Okay.
Everybody knows that.
Okay.
So please skip all those.
Okay. And at the end of the World War II, this was the 2nd turning point. And as a result of the defeated by the Allies, we lost everything. Everything means everything, and every major city in Japan was burned out, and nothing remained. So this is also same not only for the buildings but also the mind of the people. So every Japanese mind were totally empty, and at that moment we had 7 years of the occupation period by the United States. So during these 7 years, this was the reason why I called this year, the 1945, was the 2nd turning point. Was we were all restructured in all aspects, from political system, constitution itself, or education system, and everything was changed by the United States. So now we enjoyed our harvest of the economics right now, but it is somehow kind of a utilitarianism aspect. And on the other hand, we lost our most important thing, our identity or our mindset. And on the other hand, the bottom of this the sheet, I also wrote the one graph, and this shows the deterioration curve of the Japanese. And it is impossible to measure how our mindset is deteriorated in the quantitative aspect, so that this is just image. But during the Edo era, our, for example, moral increased drastically to the end of the Edo era, because this was the moment when not only the samurai class, but also the ordinary people started to learn how to behave in a daily life to make the better community, better world, better society. And the base of this education was the Confucianism. But actually, if we say Confucianism, most of the people knows the Confucianism was came from China, and even the Korean people also learned Confucianism. And I say Confucianism here again. So even for Japanese and most of the for the most of the Western or foreign people, what is the difference between China, Korea, and Japan? Because all of you learned Confucianism. All should be saying what is the difference. But actually, there are huge difference between the Chinese, Korean, and also the Japanese people in the aspect of the behavior or moral or whatever. And all the such kind of difference came from this era because of the Confucianism. And again, this one is also the main topics of today. And the reason why those three Asian countries people different was the interpretation and practice of the Confucianism was totally different. So that was the one big topics of today's lecture. And after the Meiji Restoration, the people's morals gradually decreasing to the end of the World War II. Because at this moment, as you already see at the upper graphs, we enjoyed the drastically increase of the economics. That means now at that moment, many people could have many properties, things, and nobody suffered with eating or sleeping or clothing or whatever. So that everybody enjoyed their life, but on the other hand, they are gradually decreasing their moral or identity. And at the end of the World War II, this was the second the turning point. And because of the occupation period, our education system was drastically changed, as I explained. That was the one, I think, the biggest the reason why our attitude or moral or the emptiness about the identity caused by this period. Now we are at this position. So how can we recover this situation while even we have still some level of the economics, but the happiness of the society or nation is not satisfied only because of the economics. We should think about something more than that. So okay, and okay.
Uno-san, I have one not serious question, but as Sonoda-san mentioned, there is Japanese traditional art in the Edo era. This is a kind of unique style of the art, I mean the painting.
Mm-hmm.
Then we are studying in the morning session that the Japanese.
Huh? Go ahead.
It's my just guess, but can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. So in the morning session, we studied 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, the Japanese the poem, Japanese poem, based on Japanese philosophy. This philosophy is basically based on the Confucianism. Just the Japanese traditional poem doesn't mention who is looking at something, and something is happening in front of someone. So the Japanese traditional poem is trying to
You're talking about
frustrate
you're talking about Matsuo Basho?
Matsuo Basho.
Okay.
This is like, it doesn't matter. Here is me and he's there. Then I'm doing something and something is doing something. So this is not the concept of the Japanese poem based on the Japanese Confucianism.
Okay.
So
Japanese,
they doesn't distinguish something and someone, and who is subject and what is object. So they called Japanese philosopher called it the absolute nothingness. So there is not any subject and object. Then also I found it may be affected. The Japanese painting is also affected. So it's been used to, it used to be said the Japanese traditional painting is not addition, is subtraction. I mean, the take away something on the board. So while the Western, the art is trying to fill up something on the board.
I think this is different. No affected by just kind of Japanese poem influenced by sort of, absolute nothingness. Matsuo Basho is exactly, we try to unify objective and subjective, but Japanese paintings is different. They are not influenced by kind of sort of thinking about only pure painting. This is I never heard about that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very different. This is I don't know, because those painters is they don't have kind of sort of different from different sort of artists. Like Matsuo Basho is actually he's a super poem maker, and he just very different type of person compared with the other people, and more spiritual mind he had. But I don't think painters they just only paint, just only the painting, not like spiritual.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes Japanese painting is said the painter it seems to like Westerners, the Japanese Japanese painters wants the audience to see nothing in the space. The space with nothing is the main contents of this painting.
I don't think so. I think basically Japanese old painting is based upon sex-relating painting, right? So
I mean, some scenery, the big wave.
But
even though there is a big wave, but still the space with nothing is saying something.
I don't think so. I've never heard about that.
Okay.
But poem is just Matsuo Basho is very much influenced by sort of spiritual issues. but not Japanese old painters. I don't think so.
Okay.
I have a different opinion about
Oh,
that.
you have different opinion. I don't know.
Yeah, because as is often the case with not only the Japan but also all other foreign countries, but all sort of the art or culture or related or depending on each other. And in the situation of Japan, for example, we are now looking at the names of the philosopher, especially during the Edo era. All the name of the people are written in the Japanese, but just look at the we can say distribution of the people. I just selected the philosopher, and at the very beginning there are so many philosophers, and also at the end of the Edo era also there are so many philosophers. And as I said, middle of the Japan, one of the famous period in Edo when we had so many arts were the Genroku period. And so there is one big reason why we didn't have so much philosopher in the middle of the Edo era. And one of the big reasons was, as I said, the society in Japan was so peaceful. And one of the big good example to understand that situation is the hobby about the trip. One of the famous the place for the Japanese people to visit was the Oise, Ise Shrine there. That is the middle of the Japan, close to the Nagoya. And we had a huge boom of the trip or tourism in Japan, especially during the middle of the Edo. And yeah, there are difference between the population, how many Japanese people enjoy the tour or trip from their home country to the Oise. But roughly speaking, maximum number of the tourists is about 1 million per year. That was actually the amazing thing. And there are a lot of things we can see from that fact. One, please think about the requirement. If the people can freely travel from their home country to some the place, it should be safe. The society was, and how such kind of a safety was guaranteed. That means all the people who live along the street was all very kind, and also there should be the hotel or towns in every maybe 20 kilometers or 50 kilometers. Otherwise, nobody can travel around. So that means there are so many hotels towns along the main street from north to south. And also, some people who have money, they could even hire the taxi. But that taxi does not a car, horse, and also the cargo, which was carried by the people. And also, if you can say, and also, as I said, there are so many people enjoyed the trip. So some of them have some kind of interest to draw the pictures. Everywhere they visited, and Matsuo Basho was such kind of the tourist. So many, not a few Japanese people remained such kind of the picture or the drawings of the landscape all through these years, and some people also made the poem. So such kind of things all happens during the Edo era. So as a result of that, everything related together, and everything cause effect together. So talking about the tendency of the drawings very, very Japanese style drawings also affected by such kind of background of the society at this moment. So, bottom line is, all the kind of art, including paintings, also affected by the such kind of the situation of this era. So, of course,
Okay.
yes.
No, Takashi's question is different. His question is, you before presented flow concept, okay? Spiritual concept. And this painting is this influenced by flow concept or not? His question, like Matsuo Basho. And he said the Japanese painting, my answer for him, no, I've never heard about that. Okay, so this is a flow concept, is based upon spiritual concept or not? This question.
Okay.
Like Kimoto before said, Kaneda players, pin performer, ball is, he can see the ball is moving before he hitting ball. So this is kind of, spiritual concept. Right? So did they have Japanese painters before? I don't think so. I never heard about that. Matsuo Basho, actually, presumably he had this kind of concept because his poem is absolutely different, okay? Different from others. Like also overseas people, they kind of poem we have very much Indian, yes, but this is not only the writing poem. This is spiritual poem, okay? Usually never thinking about it. He just nature, situation, he himself unified. Sort of things happen. That's the reason he could wrote a poem, kind of spiritual poem, right? This is globally they are talking about Matsuo Basho. But Japanese Edo era's paintings, I never heard about that. Just painting. Right? How do you see?
I still have
What is the name of that? This you before said another player, that's just special word. What is the name of that?
The special
No. Not this flow and one more. What is that? This told me. Flow.
Zone じゃん。
Zone, yes, zone. Zone. This is famous word, zone. You made presentation before, flow. But zone is the same. But very popular globally. Do you know that? You ever heard that? Zone. You should study Indian, very famous for flow concept. And they are very much spiritual, and Indian poem is very spiritual. It means ordinary people cannot lie down kind of poem, because they just, Indian philosophers combine nature and he himself are combined, unified. So he just kind of sort of ideas coming out from nature. So Matsuo Basho is just exactly the same. But Japanese old painter that they realize this is a simple painter. They are talented, but not spiritual. Okay? I never read about kind of material before. Yeah. Zone is a special, concept. Of course, Japanese are hard and Western are hard. You should study zone. Very important for Indian people.
Yeah, flow or zone concept is originally, I think, Chikusen Mihai.
Oh, yes, that's right.
He is the famous.
Kuroda knows very well. But not for Japanese old painter. But poem, yes.
I don't know.
Matsuo Basho, yes. He usually, what's the name? He's a famous poem. What's that?
But anyway, even if he was the poem creator or the painters, all of those kind of people have some kind of a motivation. Otherwise, they could not do nothing. And the flow or zone was related with such kind of motivation. So I think there should be some kind of relationship with zone or flow, even if they themselves didn't realize that. That was my opinion. So
okay, let's move on.
Okay. So okay. And this one also the chart which I always show you. And the purpose of this chart is to show you how the Confucianism in China and in Japan different. Yeah, this is very, very the rough sketch, but I think this chart can help you to understand the rough understanding of how the Confucianism are different between China and Japan. And I try to explain briefly. And so in about 2,500 years ago, Confucius was born. And also not only the Confucius, but also other noble person also was born all over Japan and all over the world. In China, we had a Confucius, and in Middle East, we had also the Muhammad. Or the Jesus Christ also was born. Yeah, there are several theories, but actually, the book was found in some place which wrote about the teacher of the moral, and his lifestyle was very, very similar with the Jesus Christ. So that some people believe that Jesus Christ was born in the 500 BC around. Or the Buddha, maybe also around this era, maybe. So that somehow nobody knows whether there is some reason why such kind of a famous noble people was born in at the same time all over this globe. But this was an interesting question. But anyway, we have Confucius, 500 BC. And after that, there are two also famous Chinese people. One is the Tuchi, and another person was Wang Yangming. And both of them are famous because of the unique interpretation of the words of the Confucius. And afterwards, these are the two big stream of the learning of the Confucius, and also the difference of the teachings also caused to the people's behavior in Japan afterwards. Anyway, and so at the first moment, the Buddhist priest learned the Tuchi interpretation of the Confucius words, and this was also the answers to the question of Kimoto-san that
I can't read it. What? Kyoto? What?
Kyoto Gozan.
Gozan.
Gozan means 5 mountains. Yeah, that means at that moment the era of Asuka period, that was about 500 to 600 or so. And we had that was a moment when we started to build the temples. Because we had another nobleman in Japan, Prince Shotoku here. He lived in that period, and he was greatest supporter of the Buddhism, and also just before him, already we had so many the diplomat group who came from China through the Chosen Peninsula. And there are several reasons, but one of the reasons is to have the relationship between the two nations, maybe China and Japan, and at that moment also we Japan also have our government. And some of the members of the diplomat party was the Buddhist priest, or Chinese Buddhist priest. So eventually they brought a lot of the present or souvenir from China, but many of the books was included in. And naturally, so most of the books were about the Buddhism, and also the books about the Confucianism. That's why this was mostly.
Do you agree?
I couldn't
So that
Maybe
okay.
Ohashi disagree. Ohashi is very strong Shintoism believer.
But the teachings of in Shintoism already included the very fundamental teachings of Confucianism already. So that nobody denied that. Nobody denied that. At this moment, Shintoism was established here, and Shintoism, okay, say merged here. So this was the second the timing of the mixture. So eventually, the Japanized Confucianism was the mixture of the Buddhism, Confucianism, and the Shintoism, or even the native studies here. So, and why? But the Japanese Confucianism is different from our original Confucianism was. Okay, I'm gonna skip. No, import. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let me explain about. I draw the. I make the very last slide at the very first moment. So. So the bottom line summary: Japanese Confucianism is a mixture of the Confucianism and the Buddhism along with the Shintoism. This is a fundamental thing. And the Confucianism were harvested in Japan in terms of the Confucianism wish, who would like to realize an ideal nation. This was the hope or wish of the Confucius itself, like a Shu dynasty, where he dreamed.
What do you mean Shu dynasty?
Shu dynasty.
Zhou
dynasty.
Okay.
Yeah. Confucius dreamed for a long time. And Zhou dynasty, yes.
Very old.
Yeah, very old. Where people lived peacefully under noble emperor. And this kind of situation was only realized in Japan, especially in the Edo era. And
what the relation Zhou dynasty? What?
Yeah, because every time Confucius said he would like to realize a nation like a Zhou dynasty.
Okay.
And
Ideal country.
Ideal country.
Okay.
And unfortunately, in China, they could not realize that. But in Japan, we could do that somehow. And if we pick up the difference between the Chinese Confucianism and the Japanese Confucianism was like this. And I bred 7 breads here, and I explain one by one in as much as quick as. And one Japanese have a myth about the founding of our nation. So I talking about our original idea and origin of the kami, origin of the Shintoism. And the second, Buddhism came in with Confucianism, but Buddhist priest had power at that moment. And the third, first mixture, as I said, Buddhism and kami was combined, and the Asuka and the Heian period. And as a result of that, or the reason or the evidence of this was, one is the Honchi Suijaku theory, which I briefly explained. Combination of the God of the Buddhism and the combination of God of the Shintoism. There is a one-by-one relationship already. And the Bosatsu is also the relationship of the Buddhism God and the Shintoism God. Bosatsu is a reborn style of the Buddha.
Buddha understand. But Bosatsu is related to Shinto?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my God.
You don't know. So most of the people doesn't understand. There's no distinction for the most of the ordinary people, but that is true. And after that, we established the Shintoism. And the very first Shintoism is Ryobu Shinto, which was created by the priest in Ise Shrine. And at the same time, we also had Ryobu Shinto was created. And on the other hand, Ise Shinto was created by the Watarai Yoshiaki. He would like to put the superiority of the Gaigu over the Naigu. So these two ideas was competing. But anyway, so, and number 5, the second mixture happens in the Muromachi period. And this was the mixture of the Shintoism and the Confucianism. And one of the typical example was the book which was written by the Kitabatake Chikafusa. The name was the Jinno Shotoki. And here, one of the important point of today's lecture comes. And the reason why they tried to combine the Shintoism and the Confucianism was, at this moment, they have a huge issues of the how to explain about the justification of the South Imperial Court, Nancho, and he used the theory of the or talk about of the Confucius, which was written in the four books. And what was that? Here, Confucius only talk about revolution of the dynasties, and that he said that is a good thing. If the one monarch or emperor lost his moral, then he can be defeated by other people. So this is the fundamental theory of Tangyu 東部法閥論. This is a very important idea, but Tang Revolution. This means the expulsion of disqualified monarchs by King Tang and King Wu. And Confucius only talk about the historical truth in the historical book or in the five classics, Shunju. And but afterward, the Mencius came out, and the Mencius interpreted about this situation. That Mencius, approved about such kind of situation. That means if the current king was disqualified in terms of the, for example, moral. For example, if one king killed so many people, then this kind of bad king can be defeated by other people. So this is, and Mencius insisted that this kind of situation can be accepted. This is the theory of Tang Revolution.
This is heaven degrees.
Yes,
okay,
under the yes.
Right? So
Yes.
the heaven degrees, or this is they haven't neglect or discarded, then they cannot sustain their
Yes, that's right.
dynasty.
Right.
Yeah.
So that the Confucius talk about the historical fact, and afterward Mencius interpreted, and this is the good interpretation. And every the king or emperor can be defeated by the other people if that can emperor or king are not.
Yeah, this is
disqualified.
Confucianism. Yes, I understand.
Okay.
What's the relationship with Shintoism?
Okay. So so in Japan, at this moment we already have had established Shintoism, okay, and emperor at this moment was the son of in the context the son of the Amaterasu Omikami, okay, child of Amaterasu Omikami, which was the most important god in the Shintoism. One question is, at this moment, the emperor's court was imperial court was separated into the North Court and the South Court.
Oh, I see. So you mean the mixture of emperor, Chinese Confucianism, and Shintoism, just sort of God concept.
So that
Shinto God concept is very similar to just heaven sort of Confucianism. The heaven degree.
And at this moment, Kitabatake Chikafusa interpreted and adapted the idea of the Tang Revolution idea.
Oh, Chikabatake, he's a very special person. He's talking about Japan history of 25,000 history, right? 25,000 year history, right?
Yes. And as a result of that, South Imperial Court was justified by him. But his book was a huge effect afterward. And he was the first person who employed the idea of the Confucianism into the Shintoism.
Maybe you don't need to understand this, but this is a very big background of Shintoism, Confucianism, mixing history in Japan.
Yeah.
He explained.
Yes. And also